Welcome to the Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast with author and birth coach Alexia Leachman. Listen to mums share their positive birth stories, birthing experts sharing their wisdom, and Alexia as she shares her tips, tools and techniques to help you prepare for a fear-free birth. If you have birthing fears you want to clear, Alexia has created a free 3-part video series showing you exactly how you can clear your childbirth fears. Head over to www.fearfreechildbirth.com and sign up today. And now it's time for the show.
Hello and welcome to episode 203 of the Fear-Free Childbirth Podcast. This is me, your host, Alexia Leachman, and thank you so much for joining me today. Now, on today's podcast, I'm going to be joined by guest Sophie Messager, who's going to be talking all about birthing traditions and baby wearing and lots of other stuff, actually, because she is such a fascinating lady. But I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that in a while, because I've got a few little things to update you on. But first of all, I want to say some hellos. I want to say hello to Jennifer. Jennifer, thank you so much for your lovely email. Jennifer wrote to me thanking me that she's found the podcast, and she, like me, completely has a fear of pain. When I was pregnant, I had a massive fear of pain, and that was one of the things that completely freaked me out in my first pregnancy. And when she heard my birthing story, she's like, I've got that fear of pain too. Thank you so much for calling it that. That's really helped me. So good luck on your pregnancy, Jennifer. She's very early on in her pregnancy, still in her first trimester, so I wish you all the best. I really do. And then a big hello to Gabriella too. Gabriella, she downloaded the due date cheat sheet and she said, I love doing this. It gave me peace of mind because her first child was overdue, and she puts that in inverted commas, by 10 days. And so she now says that knowing her new due date makes her feel at peace and happy. So, well, I'm so pleased, Gabriella, to help you in this way. And anything that I can do to help you feel more at peace and happy during your pregnancy makes me a very happy person indeed. If you're listening and you haven't got the due date cheat sheet and you think that this is something that you would find useful, then just go to the free stuff page on the fearfreechildbirth.com website, where there's loads of other free stuff. I've just added loads of new stuff to that page, so you can really, I've put all the stuff there that's come from all the episodes where all my guests have offered some really good free stuff for you. So you can just dive right in and grab what you need, including the due date cheat sheet. And that's not all. I've added some more new stuff to the website as well. I'm not sure if you've checked out the shop area, and I've not really mentioned it. I probably should have, but there is a shop area and you can buy some fearless birthing meditations. These are meditations that are there to help you to release your fears. So I added 3 more there this week. So this week there's one for fear of pain, there's one for fear of losing dignity, and another one for fear of losing control. Already in there's one for fear of needles and injections. So if there's anything there that you've got as a fear, then dive right in and see what you think will help you on your journey. These are the meditations that are all part of my Fearless Birthing Academy, which is the online program that I have to help women on their journey to a fear-free birth. Anyway, enough of that and back to today's episode. Now, I'm not one for regrets, but if there's one regret that I have about my last pregnancy and birth, it's that I didn't really mark the moment or honour it with some kind of ritual, some thing that would help me to kind of take a moment and really appreciate what I was experiencing, where I was at in my life, and how it was sort of signalling such a new phase for me as a woman, as a person, in my identity and all that kind of stuff. During my first pregnancy, I had a baby shower, but since then, all my thoughts and my ideas around pregnancy and birth have changed massively. And I think when I was a first-time mum, I was caught up in a lot of the stuff that a lot of first-time mums do get caught up in, because they Google, I'm pregnant, and they get drawn to the usual places that new mums go, which might include things like BabyCenter website or what to expect when you're expecting, or Mumsnet and that kind of thing. And those kind of sites do tend to focus on some of what I call the surface aspects of birth, how your body is changing through your pregnancy, what size your baby's at, whether the baby's a melon or an aubergine, or, in terms of what's going on in your body, or what your symptoms are at that time in your pregnancy, or what maternity clothes that you should be looking at that don't compromise your style, and all that kind of stuff. And really, for me, a lot of this is quite consumer focused and getting you to buy stuff. There's all this talk about what prams to buy, what cot to buy, what carrier to buy, all this kind of stuff. And really, there wasn't really anything when I think back to my own pregnancy journey that was kind of pointing me to look at and understand that I was currently in the middle of this huge transformative and spiritual period of my life. I was about to become a mother. I was about to sort of change my identity. I was about to go through this very powerful event, and I didn't come across anything that was kind of preparing me for that and sort of saying, hey, this is about to happen. Why don't you kind of stop for a moment and just take a look around, notice what's happening, enjoy where you're at, appreciate the journey you're about to go on, stop for a moment and just be. And yeah, this is what I didn't have, and I kind of wish that I did. And now when I look back, I really, that was one of my regrets, I think, is that I wish I had taken more time when I was in it. But also I think it's as a result of my own journey that I'm now open to this kind of stuff. It's because of my own powerful birth experiences that I'm open to the spiritual power of birth, the magic of birth, the sheer momentousness of the birthing occasion. But also, you know, since having this podcast, I've been blessed with so many amazing chats with the guests that I've had on this show that have really helped to really open my own mind around what's possible with birth. And so now I'm sitting here as somebody that hopefully isn't going to be pregnant again, because I'm sort of a bit too old for that now, I think. But I really wish that when I was pregnant, and certainly pregnant as a first-time mum, that I could have had somebody going, hey, you know what, this is a really big deal, actually. So why don't you just stop for a moment and look at what you could be doing during your pregnancy, rather than getting distracted by prams and cots and clothes and all this stuff that really doesn't matter, actually. So if you like buying stuff and shopping and all that stuff, then you might just get bored of this chat, because it's probably not for you. We are going to be talking about birthing traditions. We're going to be talking about some of the ceremonies that you can do to honour birth and prepare the mother for birth, and what you can do post-birth. So to help me with all this, I've invited Sophie Messager onto the podcast. Sophie is a doula. She's a childbirth educator, a baby-wearing consultant, and she was a scientist, but when she had her children, she decided that science wasn't for her anymore, and she was completely inspired by the whole birthing thing, and that's what made her retrain to be a doula. And when I first discovered Sophie's work, I knew I had to get her on the podcast, because I saw her talking about all these birthing traditions, and I was like, I want to know more about this. I don't know anything about this. I wish I'd known more about it, and I need to get her on the podcast. And so that's what I did, and she jumped at the chance, and we had such an amazing chat that in fact we went beyond birthing traditions in terms of what we spoke about. So here are just some of the things that we've talked about. We talked about baby wearing, because Sophie is a baby wearing consultant. So what is baby wearing, and why you should consider it, and what type of baby wearing is available to you? If you're not sure what I'm on about here, I'm talking about slings and baby carriers and that kind of stuff. Also, we talk about a ceremony called closing the bones, and we're going to talk more about what that is, where it comes from, and how it can help mums to recover postnatally. We also talk about rebozo, which is a shawl, a scarf that's used within the closing the bones, but is also forms part of tradition that we also talk about. Then we talk about mother blessings, which is like an alternative to the baby shower, and I wish I'd done a mother blessing. This is the regret that I'm talking about. I wish I'd done a mother blessing, and I've already had a doula on the show, Nicola Goodall, that talked about mother blessings, and I remember thinking, oh yeah, that just sounds so lovely. So Sophie talks a little bit more about mother blessings as well, and then she also talks about some of the other cultural traditions that exist around the world to honour birth. She's married to a Chinese person, so there's a little bit of influence coming there, but she's got friends that she talks to a lot and to understand what those birthing traditions are, so she shares some of those with us. And then finally she talks about the need for a postpartum plan, a recovery plan, and why that's important, and what you can think about doing within a postpartum plan for you. So as you can see, there's loads of stuff that Sophie is going to talk about today, so I hope that you enjoy today's podcast. It's a real treat, and as an extra bonus, Sophie has offered some extra free goodies that you can download to go with today's episode. We're going to talk more about those at the end. She's going to mention those during the show, but I'll remind you and tell you what they are at the end. But basically, little sneak preview, top tips on baby wearing and all that kind of stuff. So buckle down, get comfy, get a drink, whatever it is, and listen up and listen to Sophie Messager talk about all these wonderful things that I've talked about. I hope you enjoyed the chat. Well, hello Sophie, and welcome to the Fear-Free Childbirth podcast.
Hi Alexia.
Thank you so much for coming on. Now we're going to have such an interesting conversation, because we're going to be talking about getting back to the spiritual traditions of pregnancy and birth. And this is something that I'm incredibly fascinated about. And yet I have to confess, I know very little about. A few of my previous guests have talked about and hinted at this kind of stuff, and I'm really fascinated. So I'm really looking forward to this chat. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you.
So before we start, would you mind just telling the listeners a little bit more about what you do, how you work, and how you came to do what you're doing? Why do you do the work you do?
Yeah, I mean, I was a scientist by training, and that was a career I loved and I was very passionate about. And then 10 years ago, I had my first child, and I had a doula. And the doula started me on this journey by lending me books. She lent me those books, and because I'm a bit of an information freak, I just started reading all these books, and then the passion of just discovering this whole world that I didn't know was there. My passion just went, shifted completely towards pregnancy and birth and breastfeeding and using slings and all this kind of world that I knew nothing about. And so when my child was a bit older and I went back to work, I just remember thinking, what now? What do I do? Because my heart wasn't in it anymore, and I was really soul destroying. And so I spent a bit of time soul searching, and then I started retraining. And what that led me to do is quit science completely, to become a doula.
Okay.
So I do birth and postnatal doula. I became an antenatal teacher, and I became somebody who's a baby-wearing instructor. And most people don't really understand what that means. Usually it goes in that order: antenatal teacher. Most people have heard of doula. Some people have.
Yeah, borderline.
Baby-wearing instructor. People go, what?
So let's just talk about that then. What, for those people that don't know what a baby-wearing instructor is, how would you describe what that is?
So I'm somebody who help parents use and choose a sling. I use sling in a very wide sense of the word. I mean, any carrier, yeah?
Okay.
So I'm formally trained in that. There is formal training in this area.
I can imagine, because I know I've struggled big time with slings. I've been through about 3 or 4, and some of them I just got so tangled. So exactly, I can totally understand that you'd need training to use these things.
They're like jeans. So one of the things I have to repeatedly give as an information is, that's why I do what I do, is people don't realize that what worked for their friends, what worked for them might not work for their friends, and vice versa. So you have to try before you buy. So the dream sling for someone might be the nightmare sling for you. It needs to fit your lifestyle. It needs to fit your body type. It needs to feel comfortable, and you have to want to use it. Yeah. It also needs to fit your child. So it's not something you can, you can't find one that's right for you by just going online and reading the marketing material of companies and thinking that's a thing for me, because
that's what I did. Like that. That's what I did.
So when I work with groups or individuals, I have a very large collection of slings. I have well over 70, and I come with parents. I come with a weighted doll, and if they don't know what they want, I show them everything there is. Not the 70, but they kind of work into 4 different categories, really. Wraps, which are long pieces of cloth. Ring sling, which goes over one shoulder with 2 rings. And mai tais, which is a square of fabric with 4 straps. And buckle carriers, which look a bit like rucksack. They've got clips. They're closed with clips rather than knots. And I start from there, and I'm completely guided by the parents, because the essence of my work is that I don't know what's right for you. You do. Yeah. But my job is to put the stuff in front of you so you can find out.
Yeah.
And when I work with people who work with parents, so I spend a whole day, I do a workshop, which is a peer supporter workshop. So I'm trained at what we call consultant level. So if you want to become a sling consultant, you need to do a course that's usually between 3 and 4 days long. I've done 3 of those with 3 different schools, because that's how I am. You get different things from different schools. And, in the peer supporter workshop, there's a lot of theory and a lot of practice. So I make sure the people who train with me try every single type of sling, that they're confident using it. And also that they know how to make it comfortable, how to make it safe. And most importantly, how to work with parents in a way that is empowering for them. So never criticizing, never... we do role play on like somebody coming with a baby in a really unsafe position, and they have to facilitate that without making the person feel like crap. That's a big element of the philosophy behind it. I guess that's a lot of the doula philosophy as well. It's about supporting parents to go where they want to go, but with a held experience of somebody who's basically helping you find the right thing for you in the middle of the jungle of choices that there is, but in a way that's not got any agenda. The only agenda is I want the person to come out of the session feeling happy and confident and that they can do it. It's not that it's perfect. It's not that there is one type that's better than the other. It's about that they feel, able by the end of it.
So just thinking about baby wearing, there are going to be some women that are kind of really up for that, and then there are going to be some that don't really understand it, thinking, well, I've got a pram, why would I need that? So just to sort of, for those people that really don't get it, or that are really wondering what is it about baby wearing that makes it so appealing or so attractive, what would you be able to say to people like that, just to sort of open their eyes to it, really?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm going to say first is that I'm not the sling police. So, I say to people in my classes, some people use only pram, some people use pram and sling. It's great to have option, and some people only use slings and don't use prams at all. I'm not going to have any, trying to push the agenda one way or the other, but where the sling is really, really useful for, in my opinion, most people is we're primates. Where do you see primate babies?
Yeah, they're not in prams.
Yeah, and so if I had a pound for every parent who said to me, I can't put my baby down, I would be extremely rich. I think there is a small proportion of babies who are quite happy to be put down, but in my experience, especially when they are very small, when there's this, I don't know if you've heard this idea of the fourth trimester, but the babies who protest being away from your body in the first 3 months, the majority. And so if you have no way of carrying your baby, if you have no carrying help, thing to carry your baby in, and your baby refuses to be put down, and because we are alone, most of us, when we have our first baby, the majority of us, partner goes back to work within 2 weeks, and then we are left at home all day with no social circle, and a baby who refuses to be put down, and you can't eat, you can't make yourself a drink. It's terrible. Whereas if you got the baby in the sling, usually they're quite happy, and at least you can get on with doing things for you. Whilst the baby is happy, it feels very empowering. Because suddenly you think, I can do this, I'm good at parenting, because it goes a lot further than that, because there's evidence that it can help with postnatal depression. Generally speaking, I think there's very few parents who are not going to benefit from using a carrier at least some of the time, because practically, when you go to places like London subway with a pram on your own,
nightmare.
Every time I go to London and I watch these poor mums on their own with a big pram going up these electric stairs, and because there's no elevators in most London stations.
Some of them don't even have escalators. I just don't know how they do it.
I feel really sorry for them. Public transport again. I understand that most buses won't let people have more than 2 prams.
Yeah.
So people queue at the bus stop, and this bus arrives, there's already 2 prams in there, so tough, you have to wait for the next one. Yeah,
or you're competing against a wheelchair, and then it's like really horrible. There's, it's like who deserves to get on the bus first, the wheelchair or the mum with the pram, and that's an awful one to have to deal with.
Things like, I've just been on holidays, beach holiday a few weeks ago, and you see people pulling pushchairs on the sand, backwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's that kind of situation in the airport, when you're in the airport you can keep your child in a pushchair, but at some stage they're going to take your pushchair and you have to go up the plane. There's lots and lots of situation up the plane with no means of carrying your child. There's lots and lots of situation in everyday life where it's much easier, and situation like when you have more than one child. So I've done sling consultation with people who didn't carry their first child, but the second arrived, and suddenly they're like, I need my hands to hold the hands of that one. I've done sling constitution with a mum of 3 who would not carry the first 2, but the two younger ones were quite small, and she couldn't hold their hand and push her at the same time. So having a sling meant that she had both her hands back. You can't push a toddler on the swing when you've got a crying baby in the pram if you want to attend, but you can have a baby close to you in the sling and still have your hands back. It really helps.
Yeah. So it's a no-brainer, basically, isn't it? It's an absolute no-brainer to be looking at this. Yeah. And so you talked about the 4 different types of slings. Mm-hmm. And so is there one that, I know you said it all depends on the parent and the kind of lifestyle they have, but is there one that you see parents sort of choosing that seems to be the preferred option, or that a lot of people like?
My experience in the UK, my personal experience in the UK is that people find it easier to use something a bit more structured. Mm-hmm. So,
with the clips, you mean, that kind of thing,
or that you tie with. I've got some that tie with Velcro on the waist. All sorts of stuff like that. That there are people who absolutely love wraps, and people really like stretchy wraps with a newborn. But I find that some people are really intimidated by the idea of a big piece of cloth to wrap around themselves. So, in my personal experience, the majority of people tend to go for something a little bit more structured. Yeah. That is kind of pre-formed on you, and you just kind of tie it on your waist, put the baby in, and then tie the shoulders or something. Yeah. That some of the structure of the sling is already there.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I went scary. For that. Yeah, I used
put the baby in for the first time.
Because even with the ones like that, I still managed to get myself into a right old tangle and clip the wrong bits off and get bits caught in car doors, and so have to be tying not at the side of the pavement. Just I can totally understand the overwhelming kind of intimidation side of that completely. So how long would you spend with the parents then to help them?
So when I do work on either an individual basis or a small group, I'm talking about a group of, say, 4 couples or something, I tend to spend a couple of hours.
Okay.
It goes quickly because one-to-one, with babies, the nature of them is they might need a feed or a nappy or something in the middle of it. It's not a continuous process. It's not I'm coming with... Because I like to go through a bit of theory with some pictures first, explaining how baby spines and hips develop and why you need to know about that, so that you're respecting that when you're carrying your baby. And then there's a big element on making sure it's safe, so that baby's airway is safe. Yeah. Because most of the work I do with parents of very young babies. Yeah. And so that's very important to make sure that carrying is safe.
And so how long do people typically baby wear? Because I know when I was using a sling with both my babies, I didn't really go beyond the first few months because they just got too heavy, and I was like, I can't be doing this now.
Most people's experience, because marketing being the way it is, most people's experience is going to be with what I call a narrow-based high-steered carrier. Yeah. So I'm not going to name brands because, but you picture what I'm talking about. And the problem with most of those is that they don't spread the weight very well on the parent's body. So most people find that within a few weeks after the birth, I'm saying, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, it hurts their back. Yeah. And then they say, I can't carry my child anymore. Yeah. What I can tell you is with an ergonomical carrier that spreads the weight better on your back and spread the weight on your hips, you can comfortably carry a 3-year-old.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay.
Or more.
I pick up my 1.5-year-old.
There are toddler carriers now out there, and even preschooler carriers, some of which are tested to 25 kilos.
Really?
Yeah.
I bet they're good for doing lunges and really getting
at that age you can carry your child for 6 hours a day, but have you not seen, we've all seen parents pushing an empty pushchair and having a 2-year-old balance on their hip because the 2-year-old wasn't happy in the pushchair. Yeah. So they're pushing an empty pushchair was trying to balance a child on their hip with no support. That's a lot harder on your spine and your arms than using a carrier that's bring the child close. At that age, you'd be carrying on your back usually. You won't carry a big child on your front because you wouldn't see where you go. No. And then it's much more comfortable to give the child a quick piggyback with a carrier than it is to just have them in your arm, because you see these kids, 2-3 years old, they go, I want to go up, and the parents say no, and eventually they relent because the kids don't give up, do they?
Yeah. Yes. Now I want to talk about the other stuff that you do, because you talked about when I think it was before we started chatting, one thing that you told me about was that you do a closing the bones ceremony, and you also do some rebozo. So closing the bones, I've heard a lot about it, but I have no idea what it is, I have to confess. And so I'd love for you to tell me and the listeners a little bit more about what closing the bones is and why it's so important and valuable and stuff.
Yeah. So closing the bones is something I discovered through an Ecuadorian midwife called Rocio Alarcon. She lives in the UK. She's also somebody who's got a PhD in ethnobotany. She's a fascinating woman. And what she said, I think it was 3 years ago, I went to a retreat and she gave a one-day workshop about closing the bones. And what she explained, she said that after the birth, women's hips are open. And that actually can be shown by MRI scan. You know, your hips get wider as the more pregnant you are. And she said nature will take care of closing all that back. But she said that if you don't help it, it might take a long time. And whilst this is happening, not only the women tend to have instability in their pelvis, but they also leak energy. And so Rocio says, you know, the women are depleted because nobody's closed their bone. And she said lots of old ladies in our culture have problem with Zimmer frames and hip replacement because nobody's closed their bones after the childbirth.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so what the technique she taught us is it involves some hip rocking on the floor using a cloth. In Ecuador, they call the cloth a manta. In Mexico, they call the cloth a rebozo. We're talking about a shawl. You know, we're talking about a piece of cloth that women would have had when they were younger. They would use it to carry things. They would use it to keep warm. You know, as through pregnancy and birth, midwife knew how to use this cloth to provide comfort and support. Same during the labor, and then after the birth, you can use it to close the woman's hip, and you can use it to carry the baby as well. So it's a very versatile piece of fabric to have. But the closing the bone involves some very specific rocking movement, and I can't really explain them because they're very different type of movement you do with your wrist to kind of shake the bones back into position. It's a rocking with a bit of jerking movement in it, with different types of jerking movement that you do at different points. And so the woman's lying down on the cloth with a cloth wrapped around her hips, and you're standing above her holding the end of the cloth in your wrist, and you're rocking her.
Okay.
And then once that's been done, and how long you do that is based on what kind of impression you're getting from her, you know, at least 5-10 minutes of that. And then after that, you start doing a massage of the abdomen and hips. And what is really fascinating for me is that Rocio, because of the way she was trained in a traditional way with her mother and grandmother, she doesn't talk about anatomical landmarks. She doesn't talk about joints and things like that. She talks about a lot of energetic aspect of the work. But I am very lucky in Cambridge to have a friend who's an osteopath. His name is Teddy Brooks, and I did the technique on him, and he's been able to tell me everything it does to the body, and actually does really significant things. So he's confirmed. He said to me that the massage is both very gentle and very effective in articulating the pelvis back into the position that it should be after the pregnancy has finished. You know, he says that there's a lot. Anybody can look on YouTube, and if you look at postural changes during pregnancy, you see what the spine and pelvis undergo is tremendous changes. You know, part of the technique is helping that back. And then the massage itself, it has an aspect. It's massaging the abdomen and the hips. There's a whole series of movements. Again, difficult to describe because you have to do them to understand how to do the massage. But some of the movements are designed to help your organs like the bladder and the uterus move back into place. Some of the movements are designed to help articulate the joints around the pelvis. And that's beyond the sort of physical aspect. There's a big element of the massage that helps women come back to their center. And what's really interesting is I've trained over, I work with another local doula called Maddie McMahon, and together we've trained over 100 people in doing the massage. And I have done the massage on many of my clients, and women and friends and the women I've trained, and people keep on saying the same thing without talking. They don't know each other. They keep on talking about the same thing, that how they feel is bringing them back to themselves. They feel held, they feel nurtured, they feel stronger energetically after the massage. They feel that it's healing when there's been trauma. Again, that comes a lot. You know, even women who've had their babies 10 years ago talk about there's big emotional releases often during the massage. And very tremendous thing that happen afterwards. Like I've had so many women who suddenly their periods came back for the first time after the birth, the day after they had the massage.
Oh, wow.
I had a client, I remember, who said she had a big row with her husband and they felt really clear the air, and the next day they felt they was back to being good again since the birth 2 years ago. I had a client who moved their child to his own room the day after the massage. He was a toddler, and all this kind of very significant, like you helped the mother close a chapter you helped acknowledge what she's gone through. The last client I massaged last week, she said to me, it felt like somebody was acknowledging what my body had gone through. Yeah. She said, it felt like somebody saying, put the hand on my muscles and say thank you. And put the hand on my uterus and say thank you. Yeah. And she said it was very, very profound and significant. And I think that's the whole thing behind that is we don't have that in our culture. So beyond the actual closing the bone, what I've started to research since I've started teaching that is that there is traditions like that everywhere in the world. My friends from Kenya, she says, you don't lift a finger. You get people fighting over who's cooking for you. She said, you don't even wash the baby. She said, you don't even wash yourself. My Indian friend, she says, after the birth, her mother recruited some old lady from the village and got a full body massage every day for 4 days. Yeah? Wow. And that's what I'm talking about. My Chinese client, they also talk about this. There's this thing in China, my husband's Chinese, there's this thing called doing the month. Again, this whole idea of a period of 30 to 40 days during which people look after you and you don't do any housework and you don't cook and people just nurture you. And we had it too in the UK. There used to be a tradition called churching, and women wouldn't go to church for 40 days. And then at 40 days, they'd come back to church. And that was a ceremony that they were coming back to the community. And so it's not something that we've not had. It's something we've lost, we've forgotten. And I'm sure, it's difficult to find accounts of it because like traditional women thing, they don't tend to be written about. It's all tradition work. And so there is all these nourishing traditions around the new mother, around the new family, that I think we really have to reclaim because we owed that. It's our birthright. People should demand it. There shouldn't be given flowers and baby grows and stuffed toys for the baby. They should be given, delivered home cooked meal and daily massage and closing the bones and. I don't know, people coming to clean their house and just basically cooking them a casserole and then leaving them to have a nap whilst they're doing it and not actually having guests to come and expect you to make them cups of tea. Yeah.
No, all this sounds, it just sounds like music to my ears, and I just think you're absolutely right. We just need to reclaim some of this stuff. And also it is so difficult to find out about some of these traditions. And so let's say there's somebody listening and she's like, oh my goodness, I would love to have some more of these rituals or traditions and introduce them. Maybe there's somebody pregnant listening. Well, there will be somebody pregnant listening who maybe wants to start doing that during their pregnancy. Yeah. What other traditions can you share with us that a woman could start doing now to sort of start really honouring what she's going through and preparing and starting to treat the pregnancy and her upcoming birth with the importance and focus that maybe that tradition would have given it before?
So there is a more soulful alternative to the baby shower. So the baby shower, and I guess everything I'm saying is the same for postpartum. Don't buy stuff for the baby. The baby doesn't care about this stuff.
Doesn't need anything really.
So the mother blessing ceremony. It's a mother-centered, soulful alternative to the baby shower. So I can't tell you exactly what it looks like because everybody's different. The idea is you tailor it to the mother, so it depends how much she is into woo. Yeah. But when I facilitated things like that for friends, it involved, sitting in a circle, passing, everybody would bring a bead and we'd make her a necklace that everybody had brought a bead that they felt was meaningful for her. And we'd make her a special labor necklace out of that. And we'd all bind our wrist with a bit of red thread and keep it until the baby was born. And we'd all pass a candle around and give her blessings, give her strength and good wishes and things like that for the birth. And she'd keep the candle to light up when she'd go into labor. And we've done things like painting a belly bump with henna, doing this henna tattoo on the bump. And again, it can be completely tailored. Some people will like that. Some people will not be into that. We've sang song in circle. We've read poems. We've read stuff that was meaningful for her. And we've read stuff that, we've basically tailored it to her needs and made sure that she felt honored and touched and supported by a group of wise women around her. Ideally, you want, people you feel really in tune with, and you want ideally women who've already given birth or not, it depends, but people that are going to form a really lovely circle of women around you. And then after that, those women, it's really awesome if they can come back after the birth and help close the bones. Because one of the parts of the closing the bone ceremony I haven't talked about is that you can also wrap rebozos all around the woman from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. So a rebozo around the head, a rebozo around the shoulder, a rebozo around the hips, a rebozo around the knees. And if you have a group of women, you can have 2 women holding each end of the cloth, wrapping her and holding the cloth. Do you see what I mean? She just rests there. Yeah. And it's very meaningful and very significant to do that.
And I'd imagine those mother blessing ceremonies when there's all those women coming together, sort of imbuing the beaded necklace that you talked about, and so the mother can really sort of tune into that in labour and help her with the oxytocin boost, that she can connect to that, and it can really help her when she maybe feels like she needs the help and support and strength that she's drawing on, and she can draw from that. So that can sound like a really powerful thing to go through. Now, I'm curious, are there any traditions that are maybe more focused on the baby, sort of maybe welcoming the baby for its journey earthside, or before it makes the journey? Are there any traditions around that maybe are focused around the baby? Or
I'm just trying to think. I've not heard personally any particular. I'm not aware. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are some around that are more focused on the baby.
I kind of made a lot of stuff up when I was pregnant, but I'd spend a lot of time and would gather friends. We had some sort of healing sessions or some focused energy sessions on nurturing the baby and just letting them know that they were in a safe place and that we were looking after them, looking out for them and talking to them, singing to them. That kind of just sort of treating them like a human being while they're still inside, rather than I guess kind of thing.
One of the things I do encourage parents to do is I talk about the fact that babies are soothed by what they've heard. When they're born, they're soothed by what they've heard in labour. I don't know if you're aware of it, but there's a study where there was a group of women that were watching, I think it was neighbours, so those women would have watched that hundreds of times during their pregnancy, and when the baby was born and the tune to that soap came on, they'd stop crying. So I encourage people to have something that they talk or sing or music or something like that, they to connect with the baby before the birth, and that then they can do that again after the baby's come skin side.
I did that. I read that research as well in between my pregnancies. So in my second pregnancy there was a little song, a kind of repetitive song that's based on the French song Frère Jacques, but that I could sort of, was very hypnotic. I could do it on repeat, so that if I was really tired I could just hum it without thinking, and I would sing it a lot when I was pregnant. But then now when she was a little baby, if she struggled sleeping, I could just sit by her cot and just sing that, and that would just send her off. And I would always go back to that, and it was a very easy one for me to kind of resort to, and that definitely worked really, really well for me. So I'd certainly encourage people to, not necessarily something like Neighbours or EastEnders.
No. Did you know that, for instance, I can't remember which part of South America is from, but there's you can buy a little necklace called a bola. Do you know what that is?
No, I don't know.
So a bola is a very long piece of string with a tiny little bowl that you wear on your bump, and the bowl's got little chimes inside.
Wow.
You're a bit like those little Chinese bowls that you can...
Yeah, like the Tibetan ones.
Yeah. And the bola is designed so you wear it on your bump so the baby hears that chiming sound, and then when the baby's born you wear it on your neck so that the chiming sound still calms them. They've got the connection to that sound that you can just jiggle it when you want to help calm them.
Yeah, I think I've seen somebody wearing one of those, but yes, that sounds like a lovely idea as well. I'll have to try and get a link.
I'm sure the culture in the world must have other traditions around things like that that you wear once you're pregnant. Certainly when, coming back to the pregnancy, there's a lot of usage of cloth to support the bump. Traditionally, many culture would have had a shawl or some kind of piece of fabric that they would use like that to wrap wrap around the lower part of the bump and support the hips whilst pregnant.
So are there any other traditions that you're aware of that you think it's worth sharing that I don't know about, that I can't even ask about because I'm just so lacking in knowledge in this area, that you'd like to share, that you think that women need to know about?
Let me think. I mean, in a more global way, I think people need to start reclaiming the fact that they need more soulful and spiritual and emotional nurturing and during the pregnancy and during the whole perinatal period. What parents need to demand, in a way, is the fact that when their baby is born, people all focus on the baby, but the parents are born up as parents, so they need looking after too. They need the same kind of nurturing that a newborn baby needs, in a way, and many cultures around the world have that. I understand that in Japan, for instance, they spoon feed the new mother.
Wow.
And that parents need to start telling people that they don't want present for the baby, but they want somebody to offer a gift of bringing them casseroles for a couple of weeks after the birth, that somebody's going to come and massage the mother, that somebody's going to come and clean the house, that somebody's going to come and deliver some shopping, that that they can just be in their nest for a bit, and other people are taking care of the mundane tasks, that they're not getting all these visitors who are coming and making them feel exhausted.
Yeah. I was very fortunate during my first pregnancy, where a friend of mine who's Indian, and she came to stay with me for a whole week, and did that. She just cooked me gorgeous Indian food that used the right kind of spices to help to kind of nurture me and build up my strength. Did the housework. I felt terrible that she was cleaning my house, but she insisted on it, and I was just looked after for a whole week, and I found that so touching and so powerful and just so loved and nurtured and all that good stuff. And I feel so lucky to have had a friend support me in that way at that important time when I became a new mum. And if you can find, even if you're able to help another woman in that way to do what you can, is just really powerful for her, and help her to feel that she can really do this mothering thing that's going to be quite a big deal for her when it's her first one, isn't it?
I think that I heard the idea from somebody who works around mental health in the perinatal area, somebody who's called Mia Scotland. She talked at the Doula UK conference a few weeks ago, and she said, and I'm going to start talking about that, she said you should encourage people to write a postpartum plan, the way they write a birth plan, write so what am I going to put in place so there's people looking after me once I've had my baby. There's a whole range of things that are available, but most people don't know it's there, and they kind of think they don't need it. Only when they come out on the other side and it's the reality of becoming new parents to a baby hit them, then they realize they need that. But it's not even articulated, and people don't encourage that. They encourage this go back to normal thing. Because let's be honest, what do we get in our culture? Partners get 2 weeks paternity leave, and then women get left on their own. At home all day with a baby, with no social circle, because let's be honest, first-time mums, most of us, our friends are at work when we have a baby, unless we are lucky enough to have a friend who's had a baby at the same time. And you have to recreate a social network from scratch, and it's I don't know what it was like for you, but for me, the first time, it was a very lonely experience. And being alone, again, we talk about it takes a village. Being alone at home all day with a baby is not a normal experience for our species. No.
I found both of my post-pregnancy, birth periods very isolating and very lonely, because in my first pregnancy, I met up with some people through NCT, antenatal classes, but they weren't we didn't connect. They weren't people that I would have normally been hanging out with. And then I didn't do classes for my second one, because I was like, I've got this whole birth thing sorted, I know what I'm doing. And so I didn't, so I just didn't have that kind of network. And I think after my second baby, that's when I started writing my book. And so I had to keep myself busy, because there really isn't anything. It's really difficult to go out, and then you've got a little baby that just needs to be fed and nappy changed, and you've got to go out with this whole bag of stuff. And I just thought, and it was winter when I had my little one. I was like, and it's snowing. I'm not going outside. I'm just going to stay at home. And it's very easy. I can see how easy it will be for a woman to feel alone, fall into something like postnatal depression. Yeah. And that's why I think we need these networks of women coming together. And are you aware of any ways that women can tap into some of these important networks locally, or if there's a woman listening going, I really, really want to seek out some of this kind of support, one thing that was available to me is I could have gone to some sort of local health centres but every time I went there, it was all very clinical. It was all didn't feel very right. I wanted something more soulful, like you've described, something more nurturing.
So, I think every new family should have a postnatal doula. Because I sometimes, to quote a friend, describe it as having your mother-in-law but without the baggage.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Because the thing I'm seeing a lot of in my postnatal doula work is that nobody else but the doula listens to the mother without having their own agenda. So they get told, oh, you should do this or you should not do that, and you should... I've just come back this afternoon from seeing a mum who was telling me she was told, you're doing it wrong, you're spoiling the baby, you're doing this, you're doing that. And she said, I know that I'm doing it right, but it's still making me feel vulnerable, and it's still making me feel doubting myself. And that's kind of nurturing, helping parents find their way without an agenda, supporting them unconditionally through that journey. Doulas don't bath the baby for you. I get asked all the time, what's the difference between a doula and hiring a maternity nurse? I said, well, as far as I understand, maternity nurses look after the baby for you, whereas a doula looks after you so you feel strong enough to look after the baby. So we might have parents bath the baby, but the way I tend to do it is I sit on my hand in the bathroom whilst the mother bathes her baby. And when she said, is that all right? I say, I don't know. Does that look all right? Does it feel all right to you? And going from there, we try to work ourselves out of a job so that by the time we've been there for, typically a few weeks, it's usually tails off. You sense that the parents are doing actually okay, and it's great because you want them to be doing like actually they can do it without somebody else around. But I would say the first 4 to 6 weeks, having some kind of support network in place, and not just the practical stuff, not just having food delivered or a cleaner, or having lots of the doula work in the postpartum period is very much emotional support, the kind I've just talked about. There's the expression intelligent tea drinking, because if somebody booked in upon a doula with a new mum, it might look like all they're doing is having a cup of tea, but the mother's feeding her baby and the doula's just listening as she talks about herself. As a new mother, I find that you have to redefine who you are. And as a new father too, there's even less stuff support-wise for the fathers. But, having somebody to help you understand that who you are now, because once you've become a parent, you're not the person you were before you had a baby. And sometimes I liken it to when you remember being a teenager and you're not a child, you're not an adult, you don't really know who you are, and it's really uncomfortable. I think when you become a new parent, especially for the first time, it feels a bit like that. Like you've been pulled apart and you're trying to put the pieces back together. And again, what I see a lot of mothers doing, and they're not having a good time doing that, is they try to do it like they did before they had the baby, because I know I did that. Because that's all you've got to hang on to. So, running around like a headless chicken every time the baby's asleep, and then not getting any rest, not getting any time to yourself. And I love, with a new mother, you'll often find me with a baby tucked in a sling whilst the mother's having a bath or a shower, knowing that she's not going to have to run out of the bath or the shower because the baby's crying. It's like having a day at the spa, when you're a new mum, to have a long soak in the bath.
I know. Can I have one of those today, please? I still get that now, with my two. Goodness, just not being interrupted, not being interrupted in the middle of the night. Could somebody just take my kids in the night if I could sleep all through, please? That would just be lovely.
Have you ever seen there's this cartoon like that where this for Mother's Day the dad said, "Oh, should I buy you a pair of shoes?" And she said, "No, actually, I'd like a line, and I'd like to have a bath in a tube and go to the toilet without an audience." And he said, "That's far too hard. Which pair of shoes should I buy you?"
Gucci, Jimmy Choo. I'll buy anything, not the bath. Well, Sophie, it's been absolutely lovely listening to you sharing all this really interesting stuff that I certainly didn't know a lot of it. Is there anything that we've missed that I should have asked you about and I haven't, that you think my listeners would appreciate hearing?
No, I don't really think so. I mean, I would really encourage women to go and talk to people from other cultures about, what they get, because much of my discovery here happened because I asked. Every time I meet people who are not from this country, I said, but what did you have? What do they do in back home? When there's a new mother, how do they look after her? Hearing those stories, so that you realize actually here we need to reclaim the way that we used to have. That, and I'm hoping that the more women have experiences like that, this nurturing held experience in the first few weeks after the birth, that the other women will have heard about it and then will go and say that's what I want.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it won't sound selfish or weird, because that's just thing people often don't dare to ask. Deep down they feel that need for this nurturing, but they don't want to ask for help, because that's it. Another part of our culture is you have to pretend everything is okay. You have to go back to normal as fast as you can after the birth.
But in fact, that nurturing starts well in your pregnancy, looking after yourself and thinking about preparing for your birth in a kind of emotional way, in a spiritual way. You're about to have this incredible, powerful event that is incredibly spiritual, if you'll allow it to be. And a lot of women don't prepare. They might work right up until the birth and not.
That's right.
And sometimes they have to. I'm not coming from a place of judgment, but it's about really preparing for this monumental event that's coming your way. And if people spent as long preparing for their birth as they did preparing for their wedding, we'd be in a much better place, wouldn't we?
I know.
And the budget as well. Like, even if they put half the wedding budget towards the preparing for birth and not on prams and nurseries and all the little stuff that babies actually don't need, but actually on preparing mum and dad for having such an amazing birth. That would be transformative for families to invest in themselves and in birth and in parenthood in that way, don't you think?
Definitely. There's a comparison, people say all that matters is a healthy baby. No. Just like if somebody said, oh, you had a really crappy wedding and the flowers didn't turn up and it rained and the caterer hadn't brought the right food, and people would say to you, well, it's all right because all that matters is a healthy marriage.
Yeah.
Didn't quite cut it with it.
Yeah, at least you got the ring, honey. No, that's not quite the same. I love that analogy. I love that you drew that like that. That's brilliant. Thank you. Well, Sophie, if people want to find out more about your work, the closing the bone ceremony, the rebozo, all that stuff that you've talked about, where can they check you out online? Where can they come and find you? My
website is called sophiemessager.com. So that's the French spelling of messenger, which is MESSAGER, not messenger.
Yeah, okay. I'll have a link in the podcast show notes for the episode so you can get all that there. And there are going to be, we've talked about some videos as well showing what the rebozo looks like in closing the bone. So I'm going to put some YouTube videos as well within the podcast show notes for today's episode. Well, thank you so much, Sophie, for joining me on the Fear-Free Childbirth podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Alexia. Bye.
I hope you found that as interesting as I did, and I hope there's something in there to help you on your pregnancy journey so that you can honour it and make it even more special and lovely and all that lovely stuff. Now, as I mentioned, Sophie is giving away her baby wearing tips. So if you want to have that as a free download, then you need to go to the podcast show notes where there'll be a big download button, and the show notes will be available for this episode at fearfreechildbirth.com/203. This is episode 203. That means series 2, episode 3. So just go to 203 and that's where you can find out all the details. There's going to be links there as well to Sophie's website and her work. Also, there's going to be some videos in there for rebozos and closing the bones and that kind of thing, and also some of the other things that Sophie mentioned during our chat. So you just need to dive right in there to check out all the useful links and things that Sophie has provided. I hope that today has been a useful episode for you, and if you have anything that you would like me to cover on the show, then please feel free to email me at fearfreechildbirth.com. Okay, see you next week. Bye for now.
Thanks for tuning in. You've just been listening to author and birth coach Alexia Leachman from the Fear-Free Childbirth podcast. If you enjoyed listening and would like to show your support for Alexia and the podcast, you can become a friend of the show and receive even more exclusive content. Visit www.fearfreechildbirth.com and become a friend today. Until next time.